Well, tonight we want to welcome you to a presentation of Sankofa Healing and Enrichment. This is where you can relax, rejuvenate your body, mind, and soul as we nurture you holistically from head to toe. At Sankofa, we believe that health is the divinely ordained birthright of every person. And this is where you can take the time out to care yourself, as well take care as they can take care to help you analyze your past in order to understand your current state of dis-ease and even develop a personalized program that will be conducive to holistic healing. Tonight's show for Sankofa Healing is on the topic, the episode, Are Our Men Becoming Women? Very important area of concern and consideration, but something you would better learn more about when you hear from the host of the program, which is here with us, Dr. Michelle Gamble. We welcome you to the airwaves.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to say good night to all of our listening audience as we embark upon the beginning of July, the second half of the year 2013. And this month we're going to be focusing on hormones, the effects that hormones have in the body. And of course, we're also going to be incorporating all the other aspects of holistic health and healing. So not just focusing on the physical, but also looking at the mental and the emotional, spiritual. So as we get ready to begin tonight's program, I would like everyone to just take time to take a deep breath in and breathe out. Breathe in. Feel the breath slowly filling your person. And breathe out. Feel yourself releasing all toxins, all stressors, all tension in the day. Breathe in. And release. Breathe out. Once again, breathe in. And out. Last time, breathe in. And out. So, as we stated, our topic for today is, are our men becoming women, or also the feminization of our men? And we're going to, once again, deal with this from a holistic perspective, looking at the body as well as the mind and ultimately the soul. And one of the things that I would like to start us off with is, once again, with the understanding that there are two variations of the one energy, the one spirit, that underlies everything in the world. And those two variations, or those two complementary, quote-unquote, halves of the one spirit are the feminine and the masculine. In some cultures, we refer to them as the yin and the yang. And again, to remind everyone that those distinctions, in a way of speaking, are not absolute, but rather they are variations on the continuum, meaning that if you have a number line, and some of you will remember from mathematics the number line, and in the center we have a 0, and then going to the left we have our negative numbers, and going to the right we have our positive numbers. So for a minute, for a moment in time, I would like for you to take, for instance, our people in the world. And, of course, in the center you have, quote-unquote, neutral zone. And then our men, the yang energy, the quote-unquote positive energy, go on a varying scale towards the right. The more yang, or the more quote-unquote masculine, would be furthest to the right. And the more yin, or the quote-unquote more negative, or the more feminine, would be furthest to the left. But again, understanding that there are no absolutes. And when we look at the diagram, the yin-yang diagram, there's also the understanding that as you go towards the yin, it will loop around in a circle and flip over to the yang. Or should I say, the essence of the yin, or at the center of the yin energy, is the yang. And at the center of the yang energy is the yin. And so both of those energies complement each other, feed off of each other, and are variations of each other, or intensities of each other. Now, when we're relating to our men, one of the things that is very difficult for us as women to grasp is that the masculine energy functions in a very different way from the feminine energy. And in many ways, we tend to villainize the yang energy or the masculine energy as it is demonstrated by our men many times. As women, we will notice that a lot of times our men seem to be almost obsessed, we believe, with the physical. Almost obsessed, we believe, with the overt demonstration of sexuality and sex. But in reality, what we must come to understand is that our men are simply functioning in a different variation of the one true energy. And it is when we accept the way in which they manifest that energy and nurture the way in which that they manifest that energy, that we can help them to reach towards the yin that lies at their center, at their core. So how does this play itself out? What does all of this mean, Michelle? You must be asking me. I want you to think, for instance, about what happens in the quote-unquote bedroom. At that point in time, most men are very preoccupied, we believe, with quote-unquote the physical. And many times, we as women tend to castigate them for that emphasis on the yang energy. And we say, man, why are you always obsessed with that? Can't you think about something else? In a way of speaking, no, they can't think about anything else. But what you will realize is that if you allow for them to have the ability to express that energy in an environment that is safe, that is accepting, that is nurturing, they will be able to get to the point where they are able to not only express that yangness, express that testosterone, but because of the safety and the security and the nurturing of your feminine principle, you will help them to feel safe enough to open up, to go deep within their core, and ultimately be able to touch the feminine aspect of themselves. But that can only be done by reinforcing, by reaffirming the masculine energy, and not by forcing or requiring them to respond or to be quote-unquote women. Their way of functioning is to go through the yang energy to reach the core of the yin energy, to go through the heat and ultimately to cool off into the into the yin energy. If we do not allow our men to express express that yang energy efficiently and effectively, they will lose their masculinity. Because we are so much in a culture where we feel that we have to force them to, quote-unquote, be more sensitive. We have to force them to, quote-unquote, be more like a woman. And that is not the way in which God intended them. Because one of the things that we have to recognize is that heat is absolutely necessary for them to be able to perform their roles as protectors of society. Without that heat, if they were overly sensitive at everything and anything around them, they would not be able to defend us. They would not be able to defend their home. They would not be able to defend their children. They would not be able to defend their nation. You can't go into battle being sensitive. When you go into battle, you have to be able to have that hard core. You have to be able to distinguish yourself and distance yourself from the quote-unquote sensitivities of the heart. That's an important function that they need to have. And if we do not support that, then we will falter. Because when we need them to be there as our protectors, they won't be anywhere to be found. Because we have done so wonderful a job of feminizing that masculine energy. And so that's looking at it in terms of the soul, in terms of the emotional aspects of what happens a lot of times to the masculine energy in our desire to, quote-unquote, make them more like us. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to have your man be sensitive and open and understanding in your relationship. But there is a need for us to recognize that there's a way in which to get to that sensitivity. There is a way in which to get to that understanding aspect of the male energy. And the way in which to get to that in a natural way is by affirming that yang energy. Because you will notice, especially within the confines of the intimacy of your personal relationships, that once you allow him to expend that yang energy, what happens after that, ladies? After that, you have the cooling off period. After that, you have that period when they're finally able to listen, to process what it is that you're saying, to hear your heart, to hear what it is that is so heavy on your spirit. But it can only come after that yang energy has truly had an opportunity to express itself in a holistic, nurturing, and loving way. The other way in which we look at the dangers of, quote-unquote, feminizing of the masculine energy, or the turning of our men into, quote-unquote, women, is in terms of the mind. Once again, there is a need for us to realize that the masculine energy tends to have a different way or a different emphasis within how they approach things mentally. Generally speaking, and there are no absolutes, because again, we have to understand that everyone is on the continuum. So every person is on the continuum in terms of going from yang or masculine to yin or feminine when it comes to the mental aspects of a person, when it comes to the emotional, spiritual aspects of a person, and when it comes to the physical aspects of a person. And you may have somebody who's very yang mentally or very masculine in terms of functioning mentally, and yet very yin physically or very feminine physically. So each person is an individual. So that's the first thing I want you to understand with regards to this particular concept. But in any case, generally speaking, men tend to operate from the left hemisphere, or should I say tend to operate more predominantly from the left hemisphere of the brain, and women tend to operate more predominantly from the right hemisphere of the brain. So how does this play itself out? Men tend to be very compartmentalized, very focused. You know, they're not necessarily the multitaskers. And so they tend to need to have a conversation that is very focused and very explicit in meaning. You cannot go into abstractions, or you cannot talk with a lot of touchy-feely words if you're trying to get across to most of our men. Most of our men need to hear you be very, very explicit in terms of what you say, and what you say better be explicitly what you mean. There needs to be no fuzziness. There needs to be no reading between the lines. And, you know, we as women have a tendency of getting angry and pissed off because, like, well, you should have known what I said. You should have known what I meant. And you should have figured it out. You should know by now what I mean. No, that's not going to happen, okay? Left side needs to be very, very direct. The left side of the brain tends also to be very rational, very logical. You know, it's not a matter of, well, oh, I feel this way and, you know, something just came to me kind of sort of thing. They tend to be very focused with precision. And they tend to also need to have that distance from a lot of emotionality. The more emotional you tend to get in a conversation, the more the masculine energy wants to back out of that conversation. And so what we need to look at is how we tend to, once again, villainize our men for functioning in that way and beating up on them because they function in a very different way. Instead of acknowledging the benefits of how they function and putting it together with the benefits of how we function to create a complementary whole. Each party, each energy needs to honor and respect the other energy. It's not about saying you have to be like me, but rather saying, I'm glad you're not like me because now you've got those bases covered. The bases that I don't have covered, you've got them covered. The weak areas that I have, those are your strong points. And so it's the same thing with our men. Their strong points are that they can sift through a lot of the emotionality that sometimes tends to get us off track. They can sift through all of that and just zoom in for the facts, zoom in for what needs to be done. At times we think that that is cold and meticulous of them, but at times that is necessary to distance yourself from being too caught up in the emotional aspects of a particular situation. Now, when we come to child rearing, we have to be very, very sensitive to how our boys are different from our girls and not expecting them to function in the way that our girls function. Our guys tend to be more upbeat, more energetic, and yet, especially within the school system, again, we penalize our boys for being boys because we keep on expecting them to be like girls, to sit there quietly, hands folded, paying attention all the time. The yang energy functions very differently. Our boys need to be active. Our boys need to be going from one topic to the next very, very quickly. Our girls will tend to be more linguistically attuned, will tend to be more verbose, will tend to have more verbiage in terms of talking about something, in terms of communicating about something, more so than the gentlemen. Gentlemen or the boys will tend to be very direct and very terse, very short in what they're saying. Very little fluff and stuff when it comes to our boys. Very little fluff and stuff when it comes to our men. And yet, again, we want to force them to be quote-unquote more feminine, instead of recognizing that that is a functionality of the masculine energy. Now, last but not least, we come into the area of the body. And this is something that is becoming more and more prevalent in today's society, which is that you see the feminization of the males in our society. And this is due to several different reasons. One of the primary reasons why we see the feminization of our males is because of the extreme amounts of hormones that are pumped into our food sources, particularly into our meats and into our dairy products. A lot of people don't recognize the fact that if a farmer uses estrogen to be able to pump up his cow, when that cow is killed, the estrogen doesn't just dissipate into the atmosphere. That estrogen, that female hormone, stays in the cow and is transferred to whatever animal, namely man, that consumes that cow. Think about the fact, in particular, that our farmers are using extremely high levels of estrogen in order to force the cow production of milk. Because the more milk they produce, the more money that they will get. Where does that estrogen go when it is pumped into the cow to create that milk? Well, once again, it stays in the cow, and it stays in the cow's milk. Our men are being fed, our boys are being fed an extreme amount of meat, an extreme amount of dairy, even though more and more scientific studies are coming out that show that we as African Americans tend to be lactose intolerant. We still have that prevalent culture within our midst that says we have got to consume a lot of dairy. Of course, that is being fed, that propaganda is being fed by the Dairy Association, but we don't think about that. We just think, milk does the body good. Pass it on. And so we drink a whole lot of milk, and we eat a whole lot of meat. And there is a tremendous source of estrogen. Another major source of estrogen in our society are the plastics that we package most of our foods in. And those are the soft plastics. And with the microwave and other heat sources, that plastic, which has xenoestrogens, which are leached into, bleed into the foods that they package. Again, you have the consumption of that excessive amount of estrogen. That excessive amount of estrogen starts to build up in the system and starts to create an imbalance in the estrogen-testosterone ratio within our men. Now, that is compounded with what we also call a development of metabolic syndrome X, or obesity. With metabolic syndrome X, or obesity, you have a combination of two things: lack of exercise and overconsumption of food, particularly sugar and carbohydrates. And we, especially as African American women, are infamous for overfeeding our men. It seems that we have within our culture this notion that we've got to make them as big and fat as possible, and yet that is one of the things that leads to a plethora, a wide variety of health imbalances. Now, what happens with obesity is that it creates within the system something that's called aromatization, which it creates within the system a process whereby the testosterone in our men is converted to estrogen. And so now you have the overproduction of estrogen within the male body, in addition to the overconsumption of estrogen from food sources. All of these things lead to the physical feminization of our men in a variety of ways, from the growing of breasts to the shrinking of the testes. It is no error. It is not a far stretch for us to understand why one of the most significant or one of the highest incidences of cancer in our particular community is prostate cancer. I believe personally that the reason why we see such a high prevalence of prostate cancer within our society, within our community, the African American community specifically, is because we have the emasculation of our men. And that mental, spiritual, emotional, and physical emasculation is reflected within the testes, within the prostate, in the form of the shrinking of the genitalia and also the what we call hypertrophy, or the excessive growth of the prostate leading to prostate cancer. So what we have done in this short matter of time is gone over some of the dangers that we have at this point in time for the possibility of forcing the masculine energy that lies within our boys, that lies within our men, into hibernation and bringing forth an excessive imbalance in the feminine energy within our men, both mentally, emotionally, spiritually, as well as physically. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
Well, first I'd like to say definitely appreciate the information that you shared and what is being presented, because it's something very important that the topic alone, when it's asked, are our men becoming women, can be taken from a lot of different point of views. But as you share it and present it in the respect that you have when you're talking about it from a holistic point of view, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, we have a more of a defined way in looking at these things. Now, I want to kind of get to one aspect of it, because it's talking about that hormonal imbalance, and you brought that up in your final part of your presentation, talking about the hormones and the things that we're doing that's incorrect. And I guess my question would be, in general, as to how can these things be corrected? Because he pointed out some things, and I guess I could even plug my own answers in if as needed. But how can one correct this hormonal imbalance with proper diet?
Well, one of the ways is to explore the possibility of not having meat in your diet. But, I mean, if you don't want to go to that extent of cutting out meat from your diet, then another thing that you need to explore is the possibility of introducing organic meats into your diet, organic sources of dairy into your diet. The unfortunate thing is that, especially when it comes to dairy, the reality is that even if you're getting, quote-unquote, organic milk, you're getting the estrogen from the cow, because the estrogen from the cow is within the breast of the female cow, simply because that cow is producing milk supposedly to breastfeed a baby cow. You know, so you're still going to be getting the estrogens from that cow, especially when we're talking about breast milk or, you know, cow's milk. But one of the ways to cut down on that is to think about organic foods. And then the other thing is to look at the excessive use of plastics, especially for those people who choose to microwave their foods or prepare their foods, heat their foods in plastics. You know, so what we need to look at is not using plastics. Particularly, I'm talking about the softer plastics, And I keep on telling people not to microwave their foods because, again, you have the molecular structure of the food that's becoming destabilized within the microwave process, and then you're combining that with the destabilization of the plastic container, and voila, boom, you have the estrogen flowing into your quote-unquote food source. So those are some things that can be done with regards to the food that is being consumed. Another thing that needs to happen is that we need to get our men and our boys a lot more physically active than they are at this point in time. A lot of our men and a lot of our boys do not do a lot when it comes to being active. And because of that, it contributes to the buildup of fats, and it contributes to the development of what we call metabolic syndrome X, which leads to things like obesity, and again, it leads to a situation in which the testosterone in the body starts to become converted to estrogen.
Sure, that's well appreciated once again. It's really exposing a lot that needs to be understood, and I think those that are listening in and will be listening to these episodes that you're sharing, that they would find the proper way in making some corrections. 'Cause I'm sure we all have some area of correction that we need to address. That's just dealing with the physical, but then you also mentioned the emotional side as well as the mental aspects of how we're dealing with effeminization, and I guess the wrong application of how we respond to things or how we actually deal with things. And that's, but when I say we, I'm talking about men as well as women in relationships. So it's a very important area and aspect.
I see. I'm in the middle of reading, studying, endeavoring to understand as thoroughly as I can the series of articles being done in Ebony Magazine right now, a 5-point series, and it's called "Saving Our Sons." And you know, one of the points that this report is pointing out is about child rearing and about how in too many of our families, the boys are expected to behave like girls, to speak, to be as verbal as the girls are, and there's not enough respect of physicality and their need for movement and action, and so you just really underline and emphasize that for me, and help me to go to another level of understanding of that issue, and so I'm really thoroughly appreciating that.
And that's something that is so key, understanding that we need to allow our boys to be boys. Mm-hmm. Now, does that mean that we want them to go out there and kill the cat? No. We don't want them to be cold and heartless and pathological killers. But by the same token, we also don't want them to be all mushy, and crying at the slightest thing. Mm-hmm. Because then, what happens when you need a protector?
Yeah.
If the protector is busy boo-hooing in the corner, who's going to protect the community? Now, what happens is that we need to give them a safe environment, and this is for us as women. We need to give them a safe environment in which to open up, in privacy, in intimacy, and this is where the bedroom becomes so key. But again, a lot of women want them to have that emotional sensitivity and openness up front, and a lot of times we want to make sex contingent upon them being touchy-feely and all that kind of good stuff up front, not realizing that men operate the reverse of us. For women, we have that emotional touchy-feeliness, and after we get that need satiated, then we become activated and physically sexual. For men, it's the opposite. They're activated and physically sexual, and they have to express that physical sexuality. And as they're able to express that physical sexuality, you will see your man literally mellow out and become more sensitive, become more receptive, become more in tune with your rhythm.
Shit. I'm having this thought, and I'm wondering what these kind of dynamics, these kind of elements, are a lack of understanding, appreciation, patience, what have you, might be contributing to the sexual revolution, the LGBT uprising.
Definitely, because again, we bought into this nonsense that we've got to have the other person that we're interacting be like us.
Yeah.
Oh, we want them to. I've heard so many gay women say, "Oh, well, I want to be with a woman because she understands what it feels like, and she knows exactly what I need and what I want." Well, guess what? That's not what the relationship is about. A big part of a relationship is learning each other.
Yes.
Is having those differences to complement what you don't have, so that you can enable yourself to bring that out of you. Your man will help you to bring the yang energy out of you and help you to strengthen that yang energy that we said is the core of the female principle. Just like you as a woman, your feminine energy will help your man to strengthen the feminine energy, which is at the core of his yang energy. And so it's not about both parties being the same, because then you can't grow. How can you grow when you're with someone who knows exactly what you know? Then what is there to learn?
Yep. Operating from the same side of the brain.
Exactly. But again, we tend to misunderstand what the whole purpose of a marriage or relationship is about. A marriage or relationship is not about you just getting on your high horse and having somebody say, "Oh, hail the queen," and you so good the way you are. The whole point of a marriage or relationship within the cultural context of our history is to help both parties to become their divine selves.
Correct.
And the only way that you're able to become your divine self is if you have someone out there, some entity out there pushing you to strengthen, to explore the aspects of yourself that aren't fully yet developed or mature.
Well, some folks are just satisfied with not even worrying about that period. So that's why some of those choices are made.
Exactly. And then because they don't realize that the whole point of marriage is to do the work, we think that marriage is supposed to be about just having play. But in reality, marriage was about getting the work done.
Yeah, we're in a society and a culture that there's no attention to pay to these kinds of things. It's all about me. What can I do? What can I get? What's mine? And just at almost every level, it's rarely about learning how to share, learning how to be patient and understanding with one another, and so as we come into becoming adults in that kind of situation, it's like, well, where is the thing that can satisfy my desire, instantaneously?
And so what we're talking about tonight is avoiding the conversion of our men into women. And the way that we do that is by truly honoring the masculine energy. By truly saying, wow, I love it. You're different. You may drive me crazy some of the times, but I appreciate that energy. And when we learn how to appreciate each other, then both parties are able to open up and allow the other person to help him or her to heal. The only way that we can help our men to be men and help them to heal from the inside, from the core. And remember, in order for our men to heal from the core, we have to get to the feminine aspect of them. But the only way to get to the feminine core of our men is by acknowledging and honoring the masculine energy. And once you do that, those defenses go down to the wayside as you bring them into your Holy of Holies. And next week we're going to talk about the feminine principle. And what our theme next week is sickness, disease, death, the new normal.
Sickness, disease, death?
Yes, the new normal.
The new normal.
Beautiful. All right, well, there you have it. Any information that you want to leave with the listening audience before you leave so they can connect with you and find out more about Sankofa Healing?
Well, once again, I would like to encourage everyone to visit our website, www.sankofahealing.com, and you can also feel free to call me. My number is 850-597-8770. And with regards to what we were talking about in terms of the imbalances in the body of the masculine energy and the feminine energy in terms of testosterone and estrogen, all of that can be figured out. So it's not a guessing game when it comes to this. There are tests that can be done. If you're interested in finding out more about those tests, if you're concerned that a man in your life may be going through this period that we call andropause, or maybe going through what we call aromatization, please contact me in order to learn more about how you can get tests done to find out what is going on and how to support your man and help him in his journey.
Shay. Well, Dr. Gamble, we thank you once again, and those of you listening, we encourage you to continually tune into the Sankofa Healing and Enrichment Productions right here on the HC Live and Direct. We separated that, so it's not part of the HC Live and Direct. You will see it part of the Harame Connection Network programming, and you can tune in each and every week here, Tuesday evenings, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, to connect with the discussions that are for your holistic health and well-being as you can become a better you.
I see, and that is indeed Sankofa Healing. Sankofa, we know what that means, looking back to the traditions of our ancestors.
Yes, go back and fetch that wisdom.
And not only that, from our previous presentations from you, Dr. Gamble, consistent with what some of our scholars tell us, if we look back anywhere in the world where something is working right and get from it what we need. So we indeed look back to our African traditions, but as you traveled in various places around the world, found some nuggets over there in those places, put them all together and make them work, allow them to work for our well-being here and now.
So, gentlemen, if you have any questions, and our listening audience, if you have any questions regarding this presentation or any of the presentations of the past, or if there are certain topics that you would like for us to cover, please feel free to contact us. Email me at sankofahealing@netzero.com, or visit our website and drop a line there, or just pick up the phone. But let's get this dialogue going. Let's get us understanding what it is that you need, what it is that you're concerned about, what it is that you would like for us to talk about, so that we can move our village forward into the next generation.
Indeed, we must. So again, we give thanks for your presentation, for your sharing of information and energy with us, and helping us to know it's important for us to explore the energy within ourselves, respect it in our mates and our partners and our significant others, to begin with childhood and respecting the differences between the way boys and girls develop, and as you put everything in the context, we got to love each other through it all. So truly thank you.
I say.
Well, to each and all, we say good night and tune in next week once again, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Life, prosperity, and good health always.